Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Flyer Sports. I'm Joe Sullivan, alongside my partner Sean Vitalis. Today, we will break down the last week or two in Dayton athletics. To start off, we have a recap of women's soccer.
It's been an action-packed week or two for the Flyers, to say the least. 3 straight wins for UD over Western Kentucky, Louisville, and Wright State University. And the Flyers outscored those opponents 9-1 throughout 3 games. 2 shutouts for keeper Batul Rita and that strong defensive line. For the Flyers, Dayton currently sits at 6-2 and has some matchups coming up against Loyola Chicago and Richmond to open up their conference play.
Well, Sean, it was about as good as a week for conference play it could have been for UD, as they got 3 straight wins, and 2 of them were really big wins in that one. Taking a look at kind of the last week that they had, a big win against their rival Wright State, 5-1 in that one, where the offense just kept it rolling. Really, we talked about it a little bit. A nice bounce back for them after a tough stretch. Lost to Purdue as well as Xavier at home, and Xavier was nationally ranked at that time. But for them to get back in the groove at the end of non-conference play at the end of the year was super big.
You never want to lose. No such thing as a great loss, but a 19th team in the country in Xavier, and then a tough Power 4 opponent in Purdue. Out of their schedule so far, those are the 2 teams that you'd be the most okay, dropping that loss to. The Purdue one was tough, 1-6, but bouncing back. And there's a team that can score 3-0, 1-0, 5-1 were those wins we've seen in the last week or so. That Wright State game, Diana Benigno and Carly Carfanta, they handled that team almost by themselves.
Yeah, Carfanta able to get on the national team of the week for Division I women's soccer, as well as, that defense has been great. You got 2 back-to-back shutouts for Batul Rita, as well as that 5-1 win, only conceded 1 late to Wright State. And the big help, really, obviously, with Batul is that defense. We talked about how could they kind of bounce back after losing Mackenzie Lutz from that team last year. Ella Ramondi has been great, as well as just up and down the board. They've been great defensively, and a lot of interesting stuff out of Coach Goch's squad. And now let's take it to the men's program and check up on their recent scorecards.
There's really only 2 games to break down since the men's team had 1 game canceled due to field conditions. But we saw UD take down Indiana on the road, a 2-0 victory, big game there. Indiana's a team that made deep runs in the NCAA tourney. The last 2 years, they've won it 8 times in their history. It's a storied program, one of the most successful, a very big win for UD.
Yeah, definitely a confidence builder for UD. The second game was moved to a neutral site in Columbus. That was yesterday, once again due to field conditions. But Dayton was taking on a top 10 opponent in the country in Western Michigan. The Broncos led early, got out to a quick goal and a good start, but a penalty kick right before the half from Hjalti Sigurdsson would tie it up for the Flyers. That match ended up being a 1-1 draw, but overall a good outcome for the Dayton Flyers.
Coach Courier has UD firing on all cylinders as they took down Indiana on the road, and a big Power 4 win for UD in that matchup against Western Michigan. And that's one that you're happy to come out with the draw. This is a UD team that has a tough schedule. We talked about it a week ago. Not much changing there. A few teams that they're going to play that are receiving votes. A few teams that are in the top 25 and in the top 10. Western was at one point in the top 5.
Yeah, for Dayton, able to get a draw out of that game, definitely a good outcome. Obviously, they wanted the win. It was a really tight matchup down the stretch. You kind of felt like it could go either way, but both teams not scoring in the second half. The PK from Hjalti Sigurdsson right before the half was able to get them a draw against a top 10 team in the program. This Western Michigan team is legit. I mean, they've been in the Sweet 16 the last 2 years. They win their conference year after year. So really good for Dayton, who actually just got into the top 25 for men's soccer. Down the stretch, they have a lot of really good games to kind of prove themselves against non-conference opponents. We talked about this one with Western Michigan. That Indiana win was absolutely ginormous. You take a look at what Indiana has been able to do, like you said, over the past few years. It's been big for them, a 2-0 win on the road. That's their first road win as well. So a big confidence booster for them, kind of just going down the stretch to see what they can do in A10 play on the road. They'll have some really good teams that they're facing in the A10, though, next Saturday as they'll take on VCU. But today, this weekend, they'll take Loyola Chicago on at their place for their first A10 game. And it's a really, last year, Dayton was able to kind of defy the odds after a slow start in the season and in A-10 play. But this year, they've been able to get out to a stronger start like they did 2 years ago when they were nationally ranked early on in the year. And they'll have a lot of chances in this A-10 to kind of prove themselves.
Absolutely. There's a Dayton offense that can be extremely potent when it is working to its best capacity. There's an offense that is in the top 10 in the nation in shots, top 30 in shots on goal. Joseph Meltokuya is top 10 on total shots, and he's also in the top 50 for sure in shots on goal. Someone that can put a few in the back of the net and also play make for some other offensive players. They got it done with a PK to bring that back from what would have been a tough loss. But this is a team, once we get into conference play, VCU is currently receiving votes. They were tied for 22nd. St. Louis has dropped out of the rankings. They were also between that 20 to 25 mark. And, if you know anything about A-10 soccer, the past 5-6 years, everything has ran through St. Louis. Last year, men's team got it done towards the A-10 tournament. That back stretch started playing really well, won their last 6 games, lost to Louisville in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but really turned it around. They were the last team to make it into that A-10 tourney, and that's what we're headed towards. Conference play coming up. VCU on Saturday. That one is home at Beaujon. And then they're going to go on the road to George Washington. They've also got that game against Loyola Chicago that you talked about, Joe. So a few really big ones, tough opponents, and some needed wins at home.
Yeah, this VCU team actually received votes. They were nationally ranked, not this past rankings, but the rankings before that, as well as St. Louis, another team that was in the top 25. Both teams are out of the top 25 as of now, but that just kind of shows you how deep the A-10 is for men's soccer at the moment. You take a look at the Flyers and what they've been able to do. Offensively, Martin Blacken able to get Offensive Player of the Week in the A-10, and Dario Catan, Defensive Player of the Week for the A-10. At keeper, he did a fantastic job yesterday. Had a few really big saves late in that game against Western Michigan that kept them at that draw in that outcome. But for Dayton, a lot to look forward to. You talk about kind of the teams they're going to play in the A-10. They'll also be able to take on West Virginia later down in the stretch for a non-conference game, who's currently a top 5 team in the country. They were in the Final Four last year, and they are able to get that kind of scheduled every single year. This time, it'll be at home, so hopefully we'll be able to see that here at our place at Beauchamp Field.
Yep, a season ago, a 2-2 draw against Western Virginia on the road. We'll see if they can get it done this year, a big top 5 win. Joe, let's send it to volleyball, wrap this episode up. And they've been on the road recently. They've been active playing in a few different invitationals that they're quite familiar with. They were at Wright State, got 3 straight wins, didn't drop a set. Wright State, Bowling Green State, and UMBC, all 3-0. Really stellar play from Liana Sarkisian, Alexia Almodovar, Alyssa Miller. 2 of them were on that all-tourney team, and Sarkisian was the player of that invitational, which is a huge step. Really pulled into that middle blocker position and has excelled. Then again on the road at the Western Kentucky Invitational, Illinois, a big 3-1 Power 4 win for them. Western Kentucky swept them 2nd year in a row. We've done that for the Hilltoppers. That's a team they're ranked 25th to start the season again. Saw that a year ago. We started with Western Kentucky, 3-0, big win. We've got their number. It took a tough loss, 1-3 to Marquette, and that's one similar story. Marquette was a 12th team in the country a season ago, lost in 5 sets this time, dropped it in 4. It was the last game of an invitational, so part of that, could be, it's last game, been there overnight, stress, fatigue, all of those sort of things. But Flyers currently sitting at 7-1, a very comfortable place for them.
Yeah, really good start for the Dayton Flyers and Coach Ortman's squad for September. You take a look at kind of the end of the month, we saw them play in that Dayton Invitational with that 3-game stretch that they had at the Frerick Center. Got to those 2 wins to start the year, beating UNI and beating FIU. Played Ohio State on that Saturday to kind of end the Invitational, a big rivalry game. It ended up being a no contest as Dayton was able to get the first set, Ohio State got the second, and because of the conditions of the court, they were unable to finish that game. But for Dayton to kind of get back into the swing of things, like you said, sweeping that Wright State Invitational, and then going on the road, obviously a tough loss to a Marquette team that kind of stings, especially after last year, which was a really good game. It came down to really the final few points of the entire game in that one, but a big win against Illinois, a nice Big Ten opponent. This Dayton team was in the top 25. It'll be interesting to see where they stand at the end of the week and to start next week. But, you know, going into this next invitational where they're head down to Florida, they'll have some good competition, and it'll kind of be a nice change in pace and, you know, a different, I guess, look for them before they return back home for A10 play.
Absolutely. Some stats for the fans at home. Dayton, Alyssa Miller currently averaging about 35 assists in a match. And you also got to factor in they've only played 2 that have gone more than 3 sets. So most of the time only playing 3 sets, getting to 35-ish assists. There's been a handful that she's been at 40, 41, 42. That's stellar play from your setter. You know, if they're throwing up that sort of numbers, getting the ball, spreading it around, it's going to be tough to stop them on offense. And they're swinging at about 300 opponents. They're being held to 190, which means that blocking, Liana Sarkisian, transfer from LSU as well, has come in, added some depth, and Lainey Yates as well has been there, for years. So it's a strong front line and an older front line as well. Think back a season or 2 ago, we talked about how it was mostly freshmen, sophomores, juniors. Now they've all turned into that upperclassmen and the strongest part, in my opinion, to this Dayton team.
Yeah, and going into the season, really the question was all about the middle blocker. Who can fill that role that Amelia Moore once had, where she dominated the A10 for several years? Leah Williams, who you mentioned before, transferring from LSU, that's a really big addition for Coach Horsman. She's been great, kind of been super versatile on that front line. But Liana Sarkisian has really answered the call in that middle position. She's been great. We saw a glimpse of it last year where kind of she had that motor, played with a really good pace. But this year, kind of just taken another step and has earned her role and cemented herself as one of the top strikers for the Dayton volleyball team. So that's going to wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen, for this episode of Flyer Sports. Thank you for tuning in for your home for all things Dayton athletics. I'm Joe Silva, along for Sean Vitalis, and we'll see you next time.
Vamos!